The complexities of technology consumption are transforming transaction and support processes, as well as channel engagements. In this episode of Beyond Distribution with GTDC, Jason Beal, who is the Vice President of Worldwide Ecosystems at Barracuda, discusses the challenges and opportunities those changes bring to the vendor community with host Frank Vitagliano. They explore the value of multi-pronged go-to-market strategies and why an all-the-above approach with cloud marketplaces and MSP channels is gaining traction.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of Beyond Distribution. And I'm thrilled today to have joining us Jason Beal, Vice President of Worldwide Partner Ecosystems for Barracuda. So, Jason, good to have you.
It's good to be here, Frank. It's appreciate the invitation, and I'm a longtime fan and advocate of GTDC, so it's a special opportunity for me.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. I mean, you were on our advisory council for quite some time, and was very helpful to us in terms of helping us figure out what we need to do to continue to be relevant to the supplier community as it relates to distribution. So thanks. So, one of the things I like to do when we start is just spend a couple of minutes kind of talking about you in terms of how'd you get started? What was your path into IT? What are some of the roles you've had? Because it's interesting for people to understand that perspective.
Yeah, so right out of, so I went to UC Davis for undergrad, and right out of university, I came back to Southern California, and I got involved in the action sports industry and the surf industry for a startup apparel and accessories and surfboard manufacturer. And it really taught me a lot of hands-on business experience, right? So I had a degree in international trade and development, but until you really get in, you don't know what a bill of lading is, how to set up international distribution, what is licensing versus distribution, and how do you get the imported and exported. So that taught me a lot. And I was there for a number of years. We grew the company. I had many different roles, as you do in a startup, and wore many hats. But at some point, I wanted more of a challenge. I wanted to get into an industry that might have been a little bit more innovative, more disruptive, maybe a little bit more complex. And so at that point, I was open to recruiters, and I had a recruiter contact me with a really great opportunity at a domestic value-added distributor in the document imaging and content management space. So I went and I met with the team, met with the CEO, thought it was fascinating what they were doing. And so I joined, loved the IT, and I've been there for, almost 2.5 decades ever since, and stayed in this IT industry.
Yeah, well, and you've got disty experience, you've got vendor experience. I mean, you're certainly well suited for the role you're in. So talk a little bit about, you joined Barracuda, I guess about a year ago, right?
Yeah, it'll be a year in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah, worldwide role. I'm based here in Southern California in a home office, but I'm traveling all the time. And Barracuda is based up in Campbell, California. So you're right. I had mentioned I started with a domestic specialty or value-added distributor, and then from there, I kind of spread my wings a little bit with Ingram Micro, at that time the world's largest global distributor. And I worked, and I had a really, really great time at Ingram. Incredible culture, incredible company, incredible leadership, and worked for Ingram both domestically as well as internationally, as they relocated me and my family over to Belgium, where they had a European headquarters in just south of Brussels. My wife is French. My kids at that time spoke French, so it was really easy for me for our family to adapt. And we ended up spending 8 years in Belgium, working both with Ingram and then later with Palo Alto Networks. So yeah, I made a lot of relationships while I was in Europe, and one of the relationships that I made was with Chris Ross. At that time, he was working and running sales for ArcServe, and I was at Ingram. And as you do, you keep in touch over the years. And a little over a year ago in the summer, Chris called me and said, "Hey," he called me on WhatsApp. I was in France at the time. I still remember to this day, I was driving with the family in our van, just in the countryside, and Chris called and we chit-chatted, and he said, "Hey, is it looking for a head of global channels, a new role at Barracuda?" And so we kept in touch. We kept talking. We met when he came over to headquarters towards the end of the summer, and I did a lot of research. Barracuda reminded me a lot from a culture standpoint of Ingram, really kind of humble culture, a lot of teamwork, people really invested in the company, quiet confidence, not a lot of ego or politics. So yeah, I've been here a year. I love it. The research I've done is that I did has been proven correct. So it's been a great time so far.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the way, as big as this industry is, and as many people as that are in it, that's the way most of the jobs happen. It's you knew somebody, you worked with them, and they come and pluck you for the next deal. And my last three have been, exactly the same way. And that's good. And it's a testament, frankly, to you from the standpoint of being able to develop relationships, but also from the standpoint of people having confidence that you could do the job. So that's a great deal. So what are some of your top priorities? Because even though you've been there a year, obviously it's a new role, you said, so newly created. So I'm sure there was a lot of, starting up, there were a lot of things that you needed to tackle pretty quickly.
Yeah, certainly. So, right out of the gates, I'm always a believer of listening and learning. Talking to as many people as I can, from our distributors, our partners, and co-workers, just listening and learning. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? So I reread the famous book, The First 90 Days, and I try to follow that template in the first 90. And they kind of start to come to understand that Barracuda's been a channel-centric, channel-loyal company for 2 years, or for 2 decades. We're in our 20th year now. But had previously had channel management at a theater level, right? Americas, EMEA, and APAC, but did not have a real global framework, a global channel strategy, or a global partner program. And so that was one of the opportunities that I saw, is how do we create a global channel organization where internally our teams are working together, sharing best practices, much more aligned on what we're doing. So that's been one of the top priorities this year, is to create a community, create a truly one global high-performing channel organization, creating this global channel framework and channel strategy with local adaptability, making everybody feel great pride in being a part of that organization, and then having all of the right strategies and plans and metrics to drive execution. Yeah. And then externally, again, listening and learning from partners. I had a number of opportunities with our partner advisory boards, or EMEA partner advisory board, APAC partner advisory board, America's partner advisory board, to listen and learn both in the formal meetings and then just pinging them. We hosted our partner conferences around the world, talked to a lot of partners, and I have this expression that I've used for a while that I say, you've got to win the hearts and minds of the partner engineers first. So that's also been one of the priorities, is how do we do even more with partner technical enablement and partner technical training? Because if you get the engineers at the partners, if you get them to see that you've got world-class technology, best-in-class technology, they're the ones that are going to design Barracuda into their reference architectures or their multi-vendor solutions, or recommend Barracuda to their sales teams. So I think those have been, those are the priorities internally and externally. I think we're well on track there.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, you are spot on in terms of your comment regarding the engineers. I've had experience, as a solution provider executive for almost 2 years. And I have to tell you that, even though the sales reps are running around driving a lot of the sales activity, they're only as good as their support, folks, and the engineers are the ones that are supporting them and really designing in the solution. So if you win those hearts and minds, you're a step ahead of the game. Absolutely.
And then brilliant. Equally as important, if unfortunately, if you don't convince them, they won't recommend you. So yeah. Totally agree.
So, this is interesting. I love having conversations with people that have, a perspective that goes beyond just a vendor perspective or an SP perspective or a disti perspective. You've got, multiple viewpoints, so that's good, and you've had the experience. You mentioned, so disti well, and you know that I'll eventually transition any discussion over to, to Disty. But you mentioned in a news article last year, I think it was with Channel Pro, that you felt like there were opportunities for your company to do more through distribution. That was obviously in the beginning of the, of your tenure. You're now a year into it. Do you still feel the same way? And if so, what types of things are you thinking about, and what could you do?
Oh, I absolutely still feel that way. That applies both domestically and internationally, where quite frankly, the scope and the maturity of our two-tier business varies. So we have opportunities to improve, to enhance, to do more with distribution, both domestically and internationally. If you do take off the vendor hat for a sec, and I always, as you know, in these roles at vendors, you're constantly evangelizing the value of channel and the value of distribution. Right. And so one exercise that I like to do is, hey, let's put on our distribution CEO hat that have a limited amount of working capital, and where are the distributors going to make those investments? Well, they're going to make those investments in the vendors that give them the biggest return on that working cap, right? And so are we in a position where, if we look at our competitive landscape on the distributors' line cards, are we giving them an equal or better economic opportunity? We could have wonderful relationships with them. We can, do great things and be quite aligned in the market. But at the end of the day, distribution economics is quite powerful in a way that they make their decisions and focus their resources and investments on one particular vendor versus the next. So we've been able to enhance our distribution rebate internationally. We've been able to introduce a new distribution rebate domestically, which, as you know, is still incredibly important for the distributors for so many different reasons. We are in the process of strengthening our distribution program to give them more benefits for all of the investments that they do make for us. In the last year, we've got international distribution much more involved in our MSP side of the house, and they're playing a key role in aggregation of our MSP business like they never have before. And then I just finished an RFP for domestic distribution. So we think we can do more with our current distributor, and we also think that there's value in complementing that domestically. So yeah, I've been active, but at the end of the day, it's a two-way street, right? Are we providing the right economic opportunity for the distributor such that they would focus time, efforts, and investment on Barracuda? And then are we asking, and are they executing in a way that we're driving success?
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand just the magnitude, the size, and the scope of the folks that are in distribution, starting with sales folks that are out there, influencing, what gets bought, what gets sold on a regular basis, and then certainly the internal folks. And then, as the way disties are typically organized is by, sort of practices, and those folks that understand that, similar to your strategy around the technical people at the solution provider. It's a similar approach. And oh, by the way, you and I have probably both been in more than one conversation when a distributor has said, well, you're in our top 5 vendors from a contribution standpoint, or you're not. And if you're not, you got work to do. So that's great. That's a good strategy. And obviously they've got to do what you're paying them to do, and that's important too. But you make the assumption that that's going to happen, and some of the programs it sounds like you're building helps drive that, right, and helps incentive to get there.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about marketplaces for a minute, because I know you're very familiar with them, and I think there's, I don't know if I would use the word confusion, but there certainly is a lot of transitioning that's going on right now as people are trying to figure out, how do the vendor marketplaces play? What are the hyperscalers doing, and how are their marketplaces, playing? And then, of course, each of the distributors are building platforms that include marketplaces. What are you thinking about that? What's your philosophy, and how are you looking at it? Because it's a major topic right now, in the industry.
Yeah, I have many thoughts on that. And so I'll start at a high level.
Yep.
These marketplaces and all of the work that's done to drive integration in order to share data, let's call it, be upstream and downstream, is you can liken it to just a virtual supply chain or a digital supply chain, just in the ways where OEMs and partners and distributors 20 years have been building various physical supply chains in order to get products to market. The marketplaces and the platforms are another form of supply chain. It's just a digital one, right? Which ultimately is meant to drive scale and automation and efficiency to get that end user access to the technology that they want. Second, internally, I talk a lot about not just a channel strategy, but a routes to market strategy, right? And there too, I always put myself in the shoes of the end user buyer. And think about this, Frank, you're a buyer today, and let's say you want to buy something, you go online and you buy it from one of the DMRs, Inside, CDW, SHI. Tomorrow, you have here maybe a Comcast Business is your internet, and they're selling you some extra security packages, or they might sell you even your Office 365. So you buy that from them. The next day, you want to get a third-party piece of software alongside of some of your cloud consumption. You're getting that off of the AWS marketplace. The day after that, you want to upgrade your SOC, with a new XDR service. You're getting that through a regional MSP or MSSP with whom that you work. The day after that, there's a problem with your Wi-Fi, and well, that was installed 2 years ago by a great local solution provider. And so you're going to have that solution provider come in and do an assessment and maybe sell you some things and then do an ongoing health check service. There's just so many different ways that end user buyer are choosing to make decisions on procuring, consuming, and managing their technology, that it is a incredibly diversified route to market strategy. So I say all that to say marketplaces are one of those routes to market. So they're a virtual supply chain, but they're also a way to get products, SaaS services to an end customer, whether that is coming from a hyperscaler cloud provider, whether that's coming from a B2B marketplace provider specializing on a niche industry or an industry segment, whether that's from classic distribution, whether that's from this new startup cloudy distribution, whether that's from telcos and ISPs that are using marketplaces. They're an enabler, a part of the supply chain, and just parts of the route to market. That's how I see them. And so when I look at Barracuda, I have this term, I need an all of the above routes to market strategy. All right, I've got to meet that end user where they are. And so of course I need presence and automation and partnerships with all of those routes to market, from classic distribution to telco ISP to hyperscalers to MSP, MSSPs. So that's broadly how I think about it. I'm an advocate. I'm a fan. It's absolutely part of the Barracuda strategy. We're investing more in our API capabilities into marketplaces. It will absolutely be a part of both our near-term and our long-term strategy.
Yeah, what's interesting, when you were going through that, you almost have to look at it from two dimensions, though. You have to look at it from a B2C standpoint, I think, and a B2B standpoint, right? Because both play. And, the thing that strikes me, having, managed a much simpler go-to-market set of strategies, years ago when I was a channel chief, is that there's a ton of complexity associated with what you just talked about, right? Complexity around how do I set pricing? How do I set channel conflict strategies, principles? How do I manage all of that in a way that is productive, so that there isn't just, you're not playing one channel off against another, or you're in constant conflict, and I think it becomes a little confusing and hard to manage. Are you finding that? Are you finding that it's probably a little bit more challenging than it certainly was when we had direct to VAR and direct to VAR through Disti, right?
Yeah, so like that's a definite yes, and I'll answer that both generally and then with a specific. So the you mentioned like channel rules of engagement. I've written a few channel rules of engagement documents in my career, and definitely to your point, they used to be a bit simpler, right? I'm writing the latest version here. It's getting longer, right? Because of these different routes to market and the different ways that the end users can procure the technologies, and how our sales organizations engages with partners of varying business models, that document, that rules of engagement and your deal reg T's and C's, those are definitely more complex. Now, generally, though, I am still absolutely a believer in that old adage of the local trusted advisor. I still definitely believe that, end users, in most industries of most sizes, IT management is not their core competency. And so they rely on partners, right, in order to come in and educate them about the latest technologies and help them make the decisions, and then providing some services. So I still believe that there are ways within partner programs to protect and or reward those who are influencing that end user buying decision, regardless of how they end up procuring it.
Yeah. Well, and I have to believe that, you guys have been doing this for 20 years, and, maybe this is the first time there's been somebody in your role, but this certainly isn't the first time that you've gone to market through, partners, and you've got, I would imagine, a very nice cadre of partners that you guys have depended upon and had relationships with for years. And so it'd be interesting to hear what they've said to you relative to, because they always have an opinion relative to, what you're doing well, certainly, and then areas you can improve on, right?
Yeah. Well, I've always said that every partner survey in the history of mankind, when asked by distributors, vendors, or third parties, what do the partners need to be successful with a vendor? Every partner survey in the history of mankind has yielded the same answers, although these companies still keep paying consultants $50,000 to do the survey. One is they need simplicity.
Yep. Easy
Keep
to do
it simple,
business.
right? Yep. Easy to do business. Number
Yep.
two, easy to understand how we make money. Don't over engineer it. We got to know how to make money with you. Number three is you got to have credibility, integrity, trustworthiness, right? That's critical. And then product reliability. And hey, if the products sometimes don't work, be there, have my back, be supportive of me. Those tenets haven't changed in decades and decades and decades. Those same things still apply today. Again, what has changed is this diversity of business model, both at 2-tier and at 1-tier partner. It used to be a simple world, Frank. Remember, we had either broadline distribution, or you had specialty, or there was volume value, kind of those two models. And then partners, you had resellers, and then it evolved to maybe VARs or solution providers, and then MSPs. Now, holy moly, so many different types of 2-tier aggregation, to your point earlier, various marketplaces, hyperscalers, various different aggregators, master agents. And then in the 1-tier, you have DevOps providers, cloud consultants, all these new partners that I talked to and say, we're non-transactional, we only do services work, MSP, MSSP, the telcos, who are both 2-tier and 1-tier, incredibly complex. That's the complexity.
Yeah. Well, I tell you one thing though,
the partner business model, but
yeah, the four items that you mentioned, I couldn't agree more. They have been like the staples of how a vendor ought to think about going to market through partners. And it seems easy. Here's the interesting one, because I used to say this all the time. Every time you have a discussion with a customer, they would say, well, you got to be easy to do business with, you got to be simple. And you could say, well, geez, if I've been doing this for as long as I have, how come I can't figure that out, right? And the answer is every time you announce a new program, every
Yeah.
time you announce a new product, every time you announce a change of any kind, you have to go back to that principle and you restart it again. And that's the piece that people don't
Yes.
understand. They'd be like, well, how can people ask to be easy to do business with for 25 years? You must be doing something wrong. No, you're evolving and growing. So
Yeah.
interesting. One of the things so you mentioned and you rattled off very quickly this new ecosystem that now is out there. And I say new, it's not new, but it's certainly more confusing, more complex. One of the things, Jason, I've been talking about for about a year and a half, and you've probably heard me talk about it, is my notion that the distributor is sort of in a unique position, because they're, the vendor community's upstream, the solution providers downstream, the customer, and they're right in the middle here, and somebody needs to orchestrate this ecosystem. And I've been, positioning it, their role as the orchestrators. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that makes sense to you? And do you see that, or would you have a different view of that?
No, I do agree with that. I definitely agree with their role as one, they have this incredible window, and it's not just right to the vendors and the suppliers, but now with all of their business intelligence, it's down to the end users, or sorry, the suppliers, partners, and end users.
Right.
So I don't think that the industry appreciates the level of visibility that the distributors have, nor do I think that the distributors yet have completely optimized what they can do with that visibility and with their business intelligence, right? I always, like, internally when I evangelize distribution, I talk about, I say, hey, if you look at just domestically, and you just look at the top 3 or 4 distributors in the last few years, 3 to 5, they have visibility to $100 billion install base. That's a B. $100 billion. They know who sold it, where it was shipped and or entitled, licensed. They know the service, the warranty. They know the renewal. They know all of it. They know the SEC code, SIC codes. They know the partner credit situation. They know the partner growth rates. They know what else was shipped there. That's incredible, right? Distribution doesn't have so much IP, but boy, is BI the crown jewel. I would love to see them continue to optimize what they can do with the business intelligence and action that for the vendor partners and for the vendors, for the partners themselves, right? I have this expression, BI to grow the pie. The more the distribution does with that line of sight as an orchestrator with their business intelligence to truly grow the pie, grow the end user pie, and guide the vendors and the partners towards the end user opportunities because of the analytics, then they take it, to the next level.
Yeah. Well, you just in a nutshell, you just described the strategy. I mean, that's exactly the strategy that they're on with the proliferation of platforms, right? And the platforms include the marketplaces, but the missing ingredient in the platform is the data piece.
Yeah.
And I used, it's not missing, it's, to your point, it's not being capitalized upon, right? And that is going to be a major differentiator. And of course, now with AI and the ability to, really figure out how to leverage that data. And that's, frankly, I did a podcast earlier today where I was the guest and somebody asked me about the future of distribution. And I described just what you just basically went through, just what you said, which is that's the future. That's exactly what they're going to do and what they're investing in. And I think it's and I think it makes sense. Well, look, we're kind of wrapping up, but I do have a question regarding one area that now that you're living in, which is clearly an area that is critical for everybody in the whole cybersecurity space, right? And it's continuing to change. It's certainly challenging. There's lots of vendors out there, but what's your view on how do you see that landscape sort of evolving as as we go forward?
Unfortunately, it's not going to get any easier for the end customers nor for the channel. I think you just mentioned AI, that brings a whole additional level of complexity and sophistication. I think I hear all the time right now, one of the biggest challenges I hear from our partners is around the cyber insurance. The burden that our partners right now are feeling from their end customers, whether they're acting as an MSP for those end customers or a trusted advisor in more of a solution provider capacity, they're bearing the burden. It's their end user saying, help me to read this policy, help me understand the exclusions, help me to know, am I meeting the requirements? Do I have the right technology? Am I filling out these long forms? Like, help. And so, and I don't think that goes away. We see less providers of cyber insurance, we see higher costs. So the complexity, the threat, the amount of threat actors, the threat vectors with, digital transformation, mobile, all the new users, all the new, that's going to get more difficult. Now, I think the good news, and I'll mention Microsoft for a second. Okay. And Microsoft, in working with distribution, in fact, to help the partner community address our cybersecurity challenges. I always look back and I say, Microsoft and distribution did the industry a favor a little over a decade ago, dragging the partner community kicking and screaming into cloud, right? When many of us were saying, let's go to cloud, and partners weren't yet ready, or they didn't want to, and they knew the challenges, they didn't, right? Domestically and internationally. Microsoft, in change to their program, their compensation, their licensing, right? And working with distribution to educate and have those partners move, they drag the partner community into cloud and SaaS. And that's what helped the industry grow in the last 10 years, more around SaaS and PaaS and IaaS and all of our cloud models, right? I think the same thing is going to happen now with Microsoft and its distribution partners focusing more on security and Microsoft's partner compensation and its internal KPIs and bonus metrics. So focused on security, you still have a large part of the partner community that haven't built their competencies, their capabilities on security, that Microsoft and the distributors are going to, once again, pull a lot of those partners kicking and screaming into cybersecurity. That it's a rising tide floats all boats. I absolutely see that as an opportunity for Barracuda. They'll build some competencies around some of the Microsoft security technologies, but they'll also want to complement and extend those capabilities with a vendor like a Barracuda. So again, the combination of Microsoft and distribution, I really do believe is going to help the channel to be able to help their end customers with their cyber defense.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. Well, look, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I think Barracuda is lucky to have you. You certainly have a vast amount of experience. You know the channel really well, and you certainly know distribution. So you're well suited to, run somebody's go-to-market strategy. So it was great catching up with you. Like I said before, I appreciate all the help and guidance you've given GTDC, over the years. And we'll continue to stay engaged. And this was a pleasure catching up.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. It was good catching up. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the kind words, and anything that you need, anytime that you need me, more of these or panels or a sounding board or content, I'm here to help. I'm a big fan of GTDC.
Yep, great. Well, thanks, Jason. Good talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Frank.